Welcome, friends, to today's session. And we now look at the exciting world of human centered innovation, design thinking, and we specifically look at how design thinking has been successfully applied to Indian, scenarios, Indian industry as such, and that should give us a lot of inspiration to look at not only global entities, but a lot of industries have embraced design thinking as part of their innovation drive, as part of creating a culture of innovation within the organization. And also, they have used design thinking as part of creating some kind of a area where you built in a startup culture within an organization. So these have been very, exciting times within the country for us. And we specifically look at some applications across industry types. We look at automobile, we look at pharma world, HR space, how they have adopted design thinking and some of the benefits that they have got. Of course, there are pitfalls in design thinking also, like we spoke, and some of these are very important for us to really understand also. And what we will do today is we will look at some three, four examples first, and then look at our questions, and I'll keep on answering your questions, and we look at finding some answers to some of the challenges that we are facing currently and how we can successfully deploy design thinking. So let me share my screen and we'll just begin. All right. So today's space we are looking at is applications in industry, with the AMA session as part of Thinkly, as part of innovation community for Thinkly. And please do join into the Thinkly community, promote it to your friends, colleagues. There are some interesting discussions, articles, videos which we keep on posting that should really look at what is innovation. And we are looking at one branch of innovation, which is design thinking. Of course, the plan is also to explore a lot of other areas which help us drive innovation within organizations. But we first explore design thinking in particular and then look at some other spaces. My name is David P. Isaac, and I'm a co-founder of Iris Innovate. Been practicing design thinking, innovation for a long period of time, certified from various institutes, and been consulting and working with organizations very closely for application of design thinking tools and methods. So that's been the core area. And a quick view on what design thinking is all about. So we said design thinking is essentially a human-centered approach, very different from some of the other approaches which are there. And it helps us to integrate three elements. One is needs of people, the possibilities in terms of technologies. And the third one is in terms of requirements of business success. So it has to also be viable in a way, feasible, and focused onto the key stakeholder needs. So if we merge these three entities put together, what we have is an integrated space where we are able to look at innovation. But the primary point of focus here in this journey is the human centeredness, and we try and understand that aspect. And as we look at the examples, I'll bring out how the shift that happens in design thinking of converting a business challenge into a human centered challenge, and that movement, how that has brought about insights and new thinking and new entities of focus in a way, right? So here are some examples. These are some examples where I was involved with organizations, consulting them, working with them, discovering, and like we said, the discover part, to look at empathy maps, to look at journey maps, to frame it in the right way, to ideate with teams. A few examples here, and we'll take a couple of them as we go ahead, and then we will. You can, as we go along, and you have some questions, you can please do type your questions onto the chat window, and that should help us going in a way. All right. So here's the first one here, a very interesting one here, and a lot of applications of this is an example of design thinking being applied very specifically to the HR space. So HR and OD, organizational development space. So here is it's a telecom networking firm, top three of the country within India, and they adopt a lot of these new technologies. So their whole business line is they have multiple verticals, teams who focus on different technologies and provide their clients, multinational clients, Indian clients, with a lot of technological solutions, including networking and other pieces. So it's like a package solutions that they provide. Now, what that means is that the people who are delivering services and who design the technical solutions and who support teams within their journey and within who actually work with the clients to deliver value need to have a lot of new skills because technology in our VUCA world today, the technological changes are happening very fast. So the need is that the set of people who are client facing and delivery facing need to have new technologies and they should be fairly masters of them in a way, not just know them but be able to apply them. And that's the key, overall challenge for them to be, because if the clients need the new technologies, and if I don't have the right manpower who can utilize it or who can deliver it or understand it also in the first place, then we are not able to even bid for business. And then the dependency is on third party, and that if I get it done from a third party, then I lose my margin. So it's like a chain, if you may appreciate, in terms of the problem that it really creates. So like all good organizations, it has created the self-learning kind of a system, and they have this self-learning system, which is a beautiful system, and a lot of self-learning modules, training modules, and assessment is all done digitally in a way for people to get upskilled in the first place. But now here comes the challenge. Till here, everything is fine. Here's the challenge. The overall challenge is that there's a beautiful system, but people don't seem to be utilizing the system to its fullest. People need to be coaxed, followed up, progress tracked in terms of completion, and that results into underutilization of the tool, of the entire system that they have created, the learning system that they have created. And more so, whenever the skills are required, I don't have the set of people who can really deliver that in a way, or who aren't even to some in some areas able to have a conversation with the key stakeholder. Now that's the whole problem. So so how do we? So the whole challenge now is how do we develop some innovative look at solutions where people can come and adopt these learning techniques rather than the organization, OD team and training team trying to follow up and escalate and go to the supervisors and leaders so that people try and do this. So how do we get it to be like a pull system rather than a push system? And if you look at the traditional way of thinking, if you are going to, then you would have either modified the modules, you would have either promoted it with the leadership, aligned it to their performance appraisal if you don't complete certain things on time. And that's the traditional way of really working with it. And now they said, let us experiment with design thinking and how does that really benefit us? So what they did is they started looking at the employees as the key stakeholder because they were the customers, the internal customers, and their leaders because their leaders have to indicate that here is a training which my person has to do in a way because it's going to consume time from productive time. So these two became the key stakeholders, and then the team started looking at empathizing and understanding what are the challenges that these people face. And what they realized, and as they did the empathy and the journey mapping and the stakeholder identification and spoke to people, they realized, and one of the insights was that identifying of the training programs is like a yearly affair. And the need coming in from the client in terms of RFPs or new projects and other business lines keep on coming very dynamically, which people aren't able to predict in large number of ways. So the issue is that I have training module which I have programmed, say, a year back, they may not be relevant in most of the conditions. I have new training programs or new areas of technology which I need to focus on, but they are never there in the training issue. And therefore, how do I put this? And so then people don't see the value of all of this happening. So it was essentially the method earlier followed was I would look at the past list of my training programs and modules. I would add a few, remove a few, depending on the discussions I would have informally with people or my understanding. And that would be the trainings which are open for this year. And that was causing the whole issue. And they realized this through the empathy piece up. And the whole how might we became is, how might we create systems, learning systems, which are dynamic in nature, which are able to and dynamic and flexible so that new technologies can be trained and upgraded and certified for my core specific staff that I have identified and do this proactively rather than in a reactive manner. And that became the how might we. And as people started looking at it, they used morphological analysis, came up with ideas, solution designs, and that really helped them to come up with totally different set of solutions, which they were able to work with. And at a later stage, this same organization won a great, recognition of their award in terms of, you know, the so they upgraded it. It's not that they just detached the old learning system, but they modified it to make it relevant to the audience in large number of ways. And that really gave them results because what they now saw was that dependencies on external vendors reduced. I had staff with me who is capable to manage new technologies and be able to even have a conversation when the bids are happening in large number of ways and even understand the need to that extent. And that gave them a lot of business value because now it was making a lot of sense for them. And you could see the value of learning itself in the very first place, right? Okay, great. So let me just halt here. Let me take some questions and we can go ahead before we go to the next one. There's a question here from Nisha. I'm just taking as the questions are coming on the chat. So it may go all over the place, but which is the beauty of AMA session. So we will keep on toggling on different topics. So we have Nisha here. If you were to provide a design thinker starting kit to a beginner, what essential tools, mindsets would you include to help them kickstart their transformation journey? I think it's a good question. And so, where do we begin from? So, if I have to have a design thinker's kit, then where do I begin from? I think the kit would definitely contain some very basic techniques like empathy map, journey map, how might we, a bit of ideation techniques, some hands-on knowledge is just not the techniques, but how do we really apply them? For example, how do I do an empathy interview? It's just not an interview, it's an empathy interview. So the way that I am formulating questions are to be open-ended and have to have a certain flavor so that you get the other person talking in a very comfortable manner. And that I think is a very basic skill needed. One of the skills is how to ask the right questions when you are trying to discover something. And the second one is how to observe. And these two skills are very important for all beginners. And it's not that you will get it upfront, but these two skills I think are very necessary. And these, along with some tools and techniques like a journey map, empathy map, really help people to get started with. Because then they see that there is a new insight, that like we saw in the example, is nothing got to do with the efficiency of the learning portal. It's essentially got to do with what do you put it and how do you make it dynamic rather than static. So that is a quick starter here. Sahil is asking here, how do you measure the success of implementing design thinking in a business transformation? Are there any specific metrics or indicators to consider? Of course, there are. I mean, design thinking is all focused towards business outcome in large number of ways. Like you saw in this example, the business outcome that they were looking at, and you can just just think afresh and you can really get some more also is one is in terms of the very simple one internal measure. So when you talk about measurements or metrics are of two types, internal, external. So internal measures for the organization, if you look from a training ODT, is utilization of the training portal, number of trainings completed on time, number of people who got certified for certain techniques or certain technological areas on time. And so these are all internal measures, in terms of competency. What's the competency gap? Am I filling the competency gap? What's the cost of training as I do this? But the more important is from a business perspective and some measures like in the case study which I articulated here, the important part was how many new technologies where the client is demanding something, but I don't have them at the very moment. What's the gap? How many of them are such? What's the percentage of those? How much time does it take for me to ramp up on these technologies? What's the cost of ramping up? Because if I have to get my people trained and certified on new technologies, what's the overall cost? Because and the effort. So when I say cost, is not only the certification cost and the training cost, it's the effort cost of the employees. Because the more time you spend in training, the time is taken away from productive time. So you start measuring those, and how well they are defined, and ultimately it bakes into a higher level of measure of profitability, where you start talking about what is your win rate on new technological solutions which clients are demanding. Are you getting more business because you propose new technological solutions to them, to existing clients? So which is a repeat sales, retention of customers, how many engagements where you do not have to partner with third party, because if you partner with a third party then you lose your margins. So what's the margins, and how many of such engagements were without the third party? Now these become very objective measures which directly link up to business success, right? So design thinking is all got to do with, and in fact all of the examples that we look at today will have these kind of flavors. Yes, Aman, thanks for joining the community and being part of it. Yes, question of Aman is, when you encounter a new industry with its own set of quirks and challenges, how do you go about tailoring those core design thinking principles for maximum impact? So how do you tailor and how do you look at the challenges for the industry specific for a larger impact? I think very relevant question, I think, Aman. One is design thinking, as we looked at from a framework perspective, it is a general approach and it is well suited for various industries, right? I will show you examples from automobile. We looked at one from telecom, learning experience. It could be in quality management. It could be product design and others also. So it's a fairly structured way of going about stuff, and it's well tailored also. And you will see flavors. Not that it's a common method, but if I say product design and development, it will be a very detailed version of the same general four steps, but in a detailed entity in a certain way. If I look at it, design thinking in IT scenario where I'm engaging with the clients, it may have a different kind of a set of tools and methods that I use. So you will see as the industry changes, the methods and techniques which are relevant would change in large number of ways. So if I'm, say, for example, I'm looking at FMCG space or I'm looking at wellness space, then it becomes very important for me to go into ethnography and really figure out, what are the specific needs which are hidden in some way. Now, in certain cases like IT world where, you are working with your client and empathizing with them, you don't require an ethnographic study to do that. You may have a fairly profile generated, and you may look at more of data, and you may have these open empathy interviews with them. And there are other techniques that you could be along with them to really understand the need. So the answer to your question is, it has to be customized for the industry. The overall method remains the same, though it may go into granular levels for different industries. But definitely the techniques of design thinking, and design thinking, I think, has more than 650 odd tools and techniques which they deploy. The techniques that you deploy for each of the phases would change depending on the industry that you have. But the great question is which tool to use where. And that unfortunately comes through I'm not saying a detailed understanding, but some understanding and appreciation of different industries, but definitely a proper understanding of the techniques, because each method, like an empathy map, has its own pros and cons. So you should know what it can do and what it cannot do in a way before you start applying it. Because not that everywhere you will use an empathy and a journey map. No, it's not that. You will have to diversify depending on the area that you are trying to interface. So tools techniques fairly change very dramatically. Right. Okay, great. I'll pick up some of the other questions as we go along. I'll show you some other examples, and let us look at one or two examples and again come back. And as you get these questions, please do post them. Any follow-up questions also please post. Not that I have answered, so it should meet your requirements. Anything coming out of it and you want to have a follow-up, please do that. All right. We look at the second example here, coming in from the pharma space here. It can be, generally any organization which has some kind of an audit compliance to be done. So typically in a pharma entity, you would have a lot of compliance from US regulatory, a lot of European agencies who come for compliance, and there is audit compliance. And they are pretty stringent in a way because they spend a lot of time on the factory, look at data, meet up with people, interview, look at evidences, and very rigorous kind of entity. And the implications of failing an audit or having a non-compliance is very large for a pharma firm, and that's true for a lot of all of the firms. You see a lot of Indian firms who are biggies in the pharma space. If there is a non-compliance, then the implications are large because either you have to limit your exports to certain regions, either they have to undergo certain other quality checks, or you would be having to showcase a lot of other evidences and do a follow-up audit, get a follow-up audit and a compliance, and then be able to ship it off. So you see a lot of and the flip side also works. So if you have a compliant kind of a setup, manufacturing setup, and the entire setup of supply chain and others, then you get access to a lot of global markets, and you can put it for your key clients, for your new leads, and you can get new business. But if it is non-compliant in multiple ways, then it leads to a lot of analysis and follow-ups and justifications and other pieces. So this organization and the specific plant was looking at how do we be internal and external audit ready always. Means, why I should fear an audit. It's not that if I have an audit, then I start preparing something in some way. If I am able to get my people and the system and the processes working rigorously 24/7 on a certain criteria, and they are all compliant to the audit requirements in large number of ways, then I do not worry whether the audit is there or not there. I don't do any specific actions for the when the audit comes in. So I'm like audit ready always. So how can I be audit ready? And if I look at it from a non-design thinker's perspective, you would say that, if I have to be a um, audit compliant, then I need to have more internal or external audit compliant, and I need to have more internal audits. I will put more checks and balances. I will spend more time on evaluating stuff up, and I will increase and build in more checks for my entire system. So, but then there's a flip side to it, because as I keep on doing this, then I lose focus on my actual productive time, because my objective is to get good quality material out, ensure productivity is there, ensure costs are low, ensure that there is no rework and other pieces. But then if my whole focus shifts to this kind of which is usually called as a value enabling activities, my focus on value added activities reduces. And so how do I get this for the entire plant or the entire setup? What the team did is, as they applied design thinking, they started looking at the stakeholders. And what they realized was that these audits are faced by whom in the very first place. So when the auditors and external auditors come in, the audit is faced by essentially the workman, the ground level workman who is managing machines and who is maintaining and doing maintenance. And these are the people. And they need to be aware about the various processes. But if I just say that, no, 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 it's just a problem because of my workmen or people who are there managing my machines, and therefore they are at fault, if I say that, then it's wrong, because when they empathized and they spoke and they understood the overall challenges that people were facing at the time, they realized that there were so many aspects related to maintenance, related to checks and balances, difficulties that they were facing, and that difficulties in cross group communication, multiple functions being isolated in a way, and these kind of gaps that were inherently there were resulting in, ultimately when an external person comes in, you would it would all break down in a way. So the whole how might be for them was that, how might we create an a 24 bar 7 audit ready kind of a setup. But remember, the whole objective there was a business perspective. But now the whole issue is, how might we enable the workmen, the ground level workmen who manage machines and who maintain them and who do the supply to the plant? How do we enable them to be compliant to various needs which are there coming in, and to be doing that in a manner which is coherent and which is enjoyable and where people are working as a group? That's the key challenge. How do I do that? And then the whole focus shifted, rather than from creating more and more checks and balances and other, it started shifting into the people zone. And they created, what they realized, one of the key realization was that many of the documents needed to be reworked or rephrased because they were too humongous for even people to understand and read. Regional languages needed to be used. People needed to be communicated in regional language. They needed to be given some training orientation on how to speak to an auditor, because sometimes people get afraid just speaking to an auditor, and how to overcome that fear, and how to and build that kind of a coherent approach. And that really resulted into a very successful audit. When initially there were initial audit that they were planning for, and that was very successful. People found very empowered because the ground level forces were able to now face the audit. It was not that you are looking at the supervisor or the manager for answers, and that was actually identified by the auditors themselves as they audited. And that enabled them not only to face that particular audit that they were looking at, but many others, subsequent ones from different regions. And that enabled them to share some of the best practices with other locations also. So that helped them to uh, look at it. Now, if you look at the business value of this, it's all got to do with access to international markets, access to Indian markets, access to supplying to large pharma global firms as you are compliant, and that directly links into the revenue in large number of ways, right? So you looked at something from the pharma. There is audit ready always. One more we will take, and then we will take some of the questions. This specifically is in the mobility space, interior design of vehicles. A lot of you would see a typical vehicle has more than 400 odd sensors, which sometimes we don't realize that they are there, but they are invisible. The whole challenge they were working on, this particular organization, was that they were working on safety. So the whole issue was that if I have people who are traveling, the driver and the passenger in other places. Many of the carjacking instances or robberies and particular incidents of hostage taking and others were happening primarily because on occasions where either you have to open the door of the vehicle to interact with the external world, or take the glass down, or you're rolling the glasses down to interact with somebody external of to the vehicle. And so the whole need was, how do we create a vehicle or design a vehicle setup so that this interaction between the occupants of the vehicle and the exterior world is seamless. It goes on as expected, but it does not lead into the risk of getting hostage taken or robbery, and other accidents are minimized to a large extent. So we want to have the interaction, but it should be done in a very safe manner. And how do we really get this to happen? And so here they use, in fact, techniques of design thinking and some part of innovation to solve this problem. They looked at the problem from, so if I look at the problem from just the vehicle design front, then I may say that I will add some new technologies and other pieces and build it up. But they started looking at what do the people within the vehicle want, right? And what are the occasions where you needed to interact with the external world. So as they started dwelling in that, they realized and they empathized with the driver and the passengers. And because I don't want to degrade the human experience, right? I need to have I cannot have a bulletproof vehicle like this, which is, we're not able to interact with anybody else. So that should not happen. And they realized that, yes, I needed to, I should not create new complexities within technology, but how can I simply use a lot of other techniques? So what they started looking at is, how do you provide the confidence to the people within the vehicle and use sophisticated human machine interface and look at whatever technology is available in the vehicle itself for us to do that. So they started looking at the camera, sensors, door locks, smart glass, technologies which are there, and they realized that a lot of resources were already available in the vehicle, right? And they came up with a solution where there was no need for you to even roll the glass down or open the door, and you could seamlessly interact with the outside world without you having to take that risk in large number of ways, right? And it was an elegant solution because you could see all of these multiple facets being managed simultaneously in a way, right? So let me halt here, take some questions, and as you move through, post your questions as they come in. We have Farhad Mir. Farhad is asking a question here. Many businesses prioritize short-term results. How can we convince them that investing in design thinking, which might require a long-term perspective, will ultimately lead to greater success, right? So this is an irony which is faced by a lot of organizations. And if this is not addressed particularly, then it may lead into a very disastrous impact, as you would have seen large number of organizations failing dramatically, right? So Farhad, I think in my view, the focus on long-term methods, scientific methods, and I'm not just talking about design thinking, I'm talking about creating strategy in the right way, building people competencies, design thinking and innovation culture, a culture of quality, uh, building people engagement, higher people engagement, coming up with new products and systems which are innovative and industry disruptive. These kind of elements are to be actually baked into the strategic decisions made by the organization. And it's the responsibility of the leader, right? It's not the responsibility of the ground supervisor or the people who work. And organization has to consciously put effort and money and resources to identify areas which are strategic in nature, which are business impactful, and which directly would impact the bottom line, top line of the organization, or make it capable for meeting new competitive advantage, build new competitive advantage for the organization or for the team. That responsibility is the leadership, right? Senior leadership. That's the prime role. Okay. Now, the peril that we have is, and it's true for many of the pieces, is people, for the sake of doing something new, just adopt, say, design thinking or data analytics or generative AI, and they start implementing it and they see some quick benefits and they get very happy and say, okay, I am now using generative AI. I am using the data analytics. I am using some softwares for me to analyze the data. And similarly, I'm using design thinking to come with innovative solution. But if they are not linked to the strategic objectives of the organization, linked to the business elements, then all of these efforts fail. And why people are focusing on the immediate improvements are is because the past experience is telling them that these kind of long-term elements, and that was our problem. Not our problem is not your problem or my problem or anything. In the past, as people started doing some new stuff, they never integrated it with the strategic objectives and the outcomes. And therefore, people started losing faith in this. So the this whole cycle, according to me, can be curved, and it is not the responsibility, like I mentioned, of the ground staff and the supervisory staff. Is the responsibility of the leadership to earmark certain part of your effort on these long-term elements which requires effort, and which is, and if it is tied up to the business entities and effort, as well as sponsorship also, because it needs to have a lot of leadership behind, right? And that is very important. A very relevant question, Farah. Thanks for asking. We have Rashi K. What role does prototyping play in the context of design thinking, and how can it impact business outcomes? Right. So, Rashi, great. So, when you say prototyping, so right. So, just an example, like we were discussing this automobile solution that they had. What they did is you just can't go and implement it upfront. You have to prototype it, you have to test it, validate it with some kind of trials. What prototyping does is, just after you do the ideation and you create the solution and you are trying to figure out does it really work or not work, prototyping helps you to fail fast. So it's like a dummy. It's like a it's like a a prop in a play or a movie. It's not real, but you have some small images and then you do some kind of digital technology for you to get those images, and that helps you to get very close to reality, saying that does it work or really not work, right? So prototyping plays a very important role, especially when you want to get your realities towards your ideas towards reality, right? Otherwise, they're just ideas. So I need to then combine these ideas, create a prototype, which is like a prop, which is like a solution design, a probable solution design, and then iterate very fast so that I am able to make it successful, because it may always have a problem. So I overcome the challenge and I create something new. So prototyping helps you to fail fast rather than fail at the very last, because then the cost of failure will be very high, especially done and can be done for product development, is done for technology, is done for a lot of even for mechanical world. You have prototypes which are built in from rapid prototyping machines which are there, which can easily create prototype in less than some minutes or hours for small devices or products also, right? So it plays a very important, especially when you need to figure out whether it works, does not work. Prototyping also helps you to get your customer feedback. So if you can show something, if you say you're trying to create a new interface for your mobile phones, right? And so I create a prototype, which is just a working model, some basic working model. Like today you have the phones which are with the flap. What if I need to have some holographic image coming out of your phone, which is a three-dimensional, uh, where you're able to see your new dress or your shoes and others in three-dimensional form. So I have that idea and I use some technology to create a prototype, not a completely working model, but use it. It gets you whether are the customers really interested in this. Uh, and that helps you to save a lot of money later on in large number of ways, right? Great. Some other questions here. Aisha Patel, how does the ideate phase of design thinking foster creativity and generate innovative solutions for business challenges? Right. So in the ideate phase, very interesting is design thinking applies a lot of techniques of ideation, right? It has techniques like it is just not brainstorming. You have techniques like creative metrics. You have a lot of techniques like morphological analysis, mind mapping. You would have heard of. There are techniques on inventive thinking techniques, which uses principles of inventive thinking for you to ideate. De Bono's techniques, even Six Thinking Hats is a technique on ideation. So what ideation really does is when you frame the how might we and then you come to ideation, then you start using a lot of these techniques for you to ideate. But I think what is very important in ideation is you just don't do brainstorm, right? You have to experiment with a lot of other techniques, and I am a strong, proponent of De Bono's techniques. There's a technique called as concept fan. It's a great technique on how you can ideate. And if you have a group of 5 to 7 people, within an hour's time, you can easily generate 50 ideas, out of which definitely when you evaluate 10 to 15 ideas are really doable and really great. I think we need to slowly move away from just the traditional path of what we know as brainstorming in large number of ways. Only when you do that will you get innovative solutions. But even if you come to the how might we and use the brainstorming, which is a traditional brainstorming method, you will not get innovative solutions. The way to get innovative solution is to use innovative methods on ideation. And only then can you get innovative solutions. So that's the key, right? Okay, Anand asking here, what are the key differences between traditional problem solving approaches and design thinking methodology in business context? Right. So, Anand, the key difference between traditional problem solving is and design thinking looks at it from a human centered perspective. So, it's a human centered problem. It's a challenge that a stakeholder really has. And that really changes your perspective and provides you an insight. Like, for example, if I say adoption of self-learning techniques, that's a business problem. Okay. But then when you do a design thinking journey, you realize that the people aren't adopting because either the system is very complex or it's confusing or it's not relevant. And therefore, unless I create relevant, simple methods on platforms for learning, how will people adopt systems which are there? And that really helps you to generate better ideas. So that's the key difference in large number of ways. Alisha's question, in your opinion, what's the biggest barrier preventing wider adoption of design thinking? Is it a lack of awareness, a resistance to change, or something else entirely? I think the biggest challenge to adopting design thinking, according to me, is the resistance to change, and that's very elementary to any human behavioral pattern. We are coded to resist change in large number of ways, and that is a huge challenge on how do you overcome resistance to change. And when I say resistance to change, it's also and what design thinking does is it refocuses on your past, solutions. So, like a famous writer, I think Einstein wrote, is the challenges that you face today are essentially created by the solutions that you created in the past. They aren't. They did not just come into existence because it just was there. It was never there. You develop solutions and it created a set of problems. So if you look at sustainability problem today, you created a diesel engine and a petrol engine for you to have higher mobility, and that technology hasn't changed for so many years. For example, diesel engine was in the 1800 something. Similar petrol engine came much later, but it's been more than a century that it has been there. We never changed that. And other pieces all remaining the same, but the base design hasn't changed. And therefore, if I have to now look at sustainability in a new light, I must start looking at why do I need to have a diesel engine and a petrol engine? But the issue is, if I don't look at it from a holistic perspective, then I come to an electric vehicle. And for that matter, an electric vehicle is also not sustainable because it has to use these various metals which are very rare in nature, and it requires a lot of other energy to be consumed. So, so every time you generate a solution, so the issue with design thinking is it puts you into a very difficult situation because you are the same person who would critique the past, and that is very very emotionally draining because full LMS system for an organization. And when you do design thinking, it gives you an insight that people don't adopt it because it's not simple, it's complicated. And therefore, you have to go back to the drawing board. Now, which person and which human being would want to go back and critique, self-critique, and showcase to the world that it was I created it with my basic knowledge, which I had, which was insufficient to give a proper solution. And that's the key problem. Yeah. So great. I think let me check any questions. I think there are no further questions. Yeah, great. So great to have you. I hope today's session was enjoyable. We looked at some examples and we continue to look at many more examples in our future AMA sessions. And we will look at some examples in the service industry, very specifically how design thinking can be applied in service industry. Look at products, systems, how they're applied, and how design thinking changes your perspective and helps you innovate in a faster manner. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining. All the best.